So I just binged the entirety of Astra Lost in Space, or if you know it by the Japanese title, Kanata no Astra. It's been a while since I have been kind of left speechless from a story and kind of just been so amazed by writing. Like, there's a lot of good shows that have come out this year. There's a lot of good shows that came out in previous years. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good manga. There's a lot of good anime. But it's been a while since I have seen an anime really just have a solid story from start to finish. And that is what Astra Lost in Space delivers. Now, to kind of give some background and stuff, basically, if you all remember when this season, anime season, started, I did a first impressions of the story, like the first episode that was an hour long. I really loved it, and the thing is because of things that was happening, all that, I didn't get to continue watching it, so I set it to the side for later watch. And basically, the past few weeks, there's been a lot of recommendations for me to kind of get back on this series and see it for myself. And so after constant recommendations, but also knowing that it came to a conclusion, this week, I was like, okay, I want to catch up with it, I want to binge it, and let's see how this series is. Now, before I even got into this, like, before I started binging or anything, I had no idea that there would not be a season 2. I had no idea that this was actually a complete story being adapted. I had no idea, really, where it was going to go. So, when I sat down and watched it, I expected a typical, traditional, I guess, adventure story, which is kind of what the series is, but it offers so much more and gives such a complex story that I'm just kind of shocked about it. And so, anyone that is kind of on the fence about this series, for instance, Kanata no Astra, or, Astra Lost in Space, whichever title you want to apply to it, I do really recommend this series. I really can just say from the bottom of my heart that if you're wanting a good story from start to finish that really has a solid conclusion, I could even say I give it a 10 out of 10, then I give you this. I really cannot recommend this story enough. That is how fantastic Kanata no Astra is. But okay, with that out of the way, with my recommendation out of the way, let's get into just the message of the story, what it's about, what I watched, etc. So, obviously, if you didn't watch my first impressions, it was basically about a group of kids getting lost in space, and they had to figure out a way to travel from planet to planet, jumping from planet to planet, to get back to where they belong. And along the journey, obviously, we knew it was going to become kind of like a coming-of-age story, allow them to get closer to each other like a family. This was common things that we knew was going to happen. Before anyone probably watched this show, and if you knew the premise or whatever, it was obvious something like that was going to happen. And even though I expected certain things like this to happen, it's so spectacular by the way this series delivers it. It really feels like a good depiction of children in space learning how to survive and overcome the impossible. It's really beautiful. And the inclusion of the fact that this is a complete story really is just the cherry on top, and I kind of want to get into that. Astra Lost in Space is a complete story. There is nothing left. And what I mean by that is there is no manga for it to adapt. Like, it doesn't mean that the writer stopped writing and it's on hiatus. No, the series is complete. The series is officially complete. From my knowledge, there is no plan for a part 2, and that means that this is the end. And honestly, it is a perfect conclusion. It is. It answered all of my questions I wanted and answered more than I even expected. It was, like I said, a compelling story. It gave a lot of character development. There was enough time with each individual character for us to really understand them, and there was some beautiful twists along the way that, honestly, I did not expect. And I'll talk about some of the twists that really just threw me for a loop. But when it came to just the conclusion alone, it's a cherry on top because I don't see many stories end like it did. Like, many stories leave you with wanting more, leave you wanting to know what happens next. That's kind of how a lot of stories are. Even good stories end like that, and you just want to know. And honestly, I'm satisfied. I don't need to know anything else. I don't need to see a part 2. I don't need to see anything extra because I got everything I wanted and more, as I said. And I think that's just beautiful by the way the writer did this. I don't know who the writer really is of Astra Lost in Space, but compliments to them. They have made a fantastic story, and I definitely am probably going to pick up the entirety of the manga and probably the anime as well when it comes out on BD/DVD. So, okay. Let's get into the individual characters, kind of where the plot went, etc. So, at the beginning of the story, the conflict is basically finding out who is the traitor. Who is the traitor amongst the group? Who is the individual that sent them here, the organization that sent them there, and the person that cut the comms on the ship and all that where they can't really contact anyone? Who is the traitor? That's kind of the conflict for the first quarter of the 12-episode anime. And even though it's a big problem that needs to be discussed, eventually everybody comes to the conclusion that we need to stop worrying about a traitor because it's going to cause animosity, hatred, etc. between everybody. You know, nobody's going to trust each other. It's going to be very hard to deal with. So everybody sets aside the topic and they try to look forward into the future and also try to survive. That's the whole point. They think survival is more important than having untrust between each other, and it is. So that the conflict kind of is settled. It's pushed to the side for a period of time throughout the middle of the series until the final episodes of the story, when we come to the conclusion that Charstat is the individual that is the traitor, and overall his backstory gets explained, the reason why he did it, everything to give a proper motive is there. And so it doesn't feel like his character was forced to go that direction. It didn't feel like they made a character for us to hate him. Honestly, the entirety of the episode, I was really in a state of shock because I didn't want the character to die. And obviously, I knew the characters wouldn't get rid of him. It was not going to happen. After everything that we've seen from the story, from the characters, they were not going to get rid of Charles. They weren't going to end his life. But when you saw his character depiction, how his story was, it was obvious that he would definitely easily take his own life because he didn't care about himself. And when the MC, Kanata, rushed in to save him and he protected him, it didn't feel like something that was just being pulled out of the butt, like, oh, he's saved out of nowhere. No, it fit with the character, it fit with the story, it fit with the message. So I wasn't really upset with the twist and turns of how he was the main traitor, but also he was an individual that kind of changed his mood to be where he's at. And I appreciate that fact, the gradual build up to that very moment, because the time we got to that story, that moment in the story where Charles was the traitor, I didn't really know who the traitor was. See, the entire time when I was watching the story, I was thinking that it was the little girl. I was thinking that was Funi. You know, the little girl, the sister, I thought she was the traitor because she's a little girl. And if anything I know from literature and stories is usually the younger kid is what everybody underestimates. Everybody underestimates the little kid. Everybody underestimates the little child that seems very innocent. And sometimes children can definitely be very awful to a certain degree. And so I was instantly assuming it was Funi. But then, as time went on, I started to suspect maybe her little bunny on her hand. I was starting to think maybe it's a robot of some kind. It was being remotely controlled from somewhere on the main planet, and it was causing some problems. That's what I assumed. But obviously, that never happened. And so, I really do respect this story for honestly not making it obvious who the real enemy was. And it's honestly surprising, because usually stories can't hold on to that type of, you know, I guess, theme for long. It either gets stale or becomes very apparent who the traitor is. And it's one of the reasons why I think many really like My Hero Academia and its recent stuff, is that we don't know who the traitor is in, you know, the main class, the group of characters, or the teachers. We don't know who the traitor is, which leaves everybody wondering who is it, and it's scary because we care about all the characters. But getting back on topic for what this story is, I'm really amazed by the twists and turns of the story, and I'm really happy with just how it concluded every little detail that I was wondering about it. Like, for instance, all the characters' relationships with their, you know, their family, their parents, was explained. Why their parents were so distant was because they were all clones. And that's what really shocked me too. I thought it was going down that route of everybody has a tragic past, everybody's sad and unfortunate, and thankfully they found each other to be happy. And it's a typical thing you see in a story. And it's not necessarily wrong as long as the execution is done right, and that is what was done. Is that it was found out the reason why all these kids were isolated, their parents didn't care about them, etc., was because they were clones and they were just meant to be vessels for their parents to be reincarnated into, which is just extremely extremely messed up. But then things started to make you wonder what's going on with, you know, our main female character. Why is she, you know, Ares, why is she different? Why is her backstory different? Why is, you know, Charce's backstory different? You know, there's a lot of things that start to build up, and like I said, that's also explained. We found out Ares was actually a clone of the princess, and she was someone that was transferred out of the kingdom to actually have a life that isn't a vessel, for she can actually live a normal life. It's honestly beautiful. I love everything that was explained, even to the backstory of Charce and how he lied about what happened in his life. I thought, honestly, that moment was actually going to be legit, and it was going to be what defines his character, but it was a half-truth, and that's another thing that I really liked. I liked how that story with how this girl snuck into the wall, you know, fell and died, and, you know, things happened, and that's why he doesn't talk about his family, how he went away from his father, he didn't care about his father, or whatever, but it was the complete opposite. Honestly, that moment of the girl dying was there, but at the same time, there was a lot of things about the story that was a lie, and I do like how that entire event kind of pushed aside what he really was, because he did put emotions into it, because he really did desperately care about, you know, Sarah, you know, how she died, and he blamed himself. So there's just so many things that are explained and done within this story that I didn't expect the series to go out of their way and do. And then also the conclusion as well. The conclusion of finding out that, you know, everybody was trying to reincarnate themselves in their clone, and then they were settled, they were thrown into prison, etc. That's a really good move. I didn't think that was going to be settled this series. I thought, you know, there might be a season 2 or something, but it got concluded. And then on top of that as well, finding out the history of Earth itself and Astra and all that, and kind of what happened and why, you know, Lena was very different, why her history was different. Everything was explained in an orderly fashion. It didn't feel too forced, it didn't feel rushed. Everything kind of made sense, honestly, with the time frame of what was going on in human history. And I'm just really shocked, like I said, of the conclusion that led up to that. Just everything fell into place perfectly, didn't feel too fast, didn't feel too slow. It was beautiful. The only thing, if there is only one thing I have to complain about the story, there's only one single little thing, but it doesn't honestly take away from my enjoyment of the story, or even the amazing ending that it was. The only thing that is bad about this is not the length, obviously. I wish it was more, but obviously, you know, if they carried it on any longer, it felt a little bit dragged out, which is kind of why I can let what I'm about to talk about go, is that the government kind of allowing the news to reach out into the public and everybody to know about it, that felt a little bit too easy. I know that the government wanted peace, and that's why the lie was kept. It makes sense, but after all the hard work and effort put into place to kind of keep the secret of what happened to humans and why, you know, there's no religion, etc. within the world, you think that they would, you know, not want anyone to say anything. And that's the problem here, is that, you know, it was easily revealed to the public, and it was stated that, you know, the world now is a much healthier world. They can live, you know, the truth, like, they can find out the true history of the world. It feels too easy. It felt too easy, and I felt like there should have been a little bit more conflict there. But once again, I think the reason why it wasn't done was because that wasn't the main message of the story, but also if something like that was done, I think the true meaning of the story would be lost. The main vision of what the writer wanted, if the writer would have focused on, let's say, you know, an uprising of, you know, trying to overthrow the government, it would feel like a very same old story, and so maybe that's the reason why it was omitted, but I feel like there was definitely some potential there, but I could be wrong. But okay, anyways, the big point, though, of Astra Lost in Space is that it's a coming-of-age story, which is what I suspected since the very beginning, and just seeing how everybody got to achieve their dreams, become their own individual, live for what they wanted, it's honestly something that is beautiful. I can probably say that this series is a masterpiece. It really is. It's definitely something that I will definitely remember for a long period of time, and something that I will definitely recommend to others, because it is an amazing story. I can't believe I was actually going to kind of overlook this series until so many recommendations popped up for it. I do appreciate it. And thank you so much for all of you guys out there that did recommend this story, because I did love it from start to finish, and I'm so glad I got to binge this. So, yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up this video here. Just one last thing to say, though, is that I recommend this fully. I really do. If you somehow skip to the ending of this video or whatever, I cannot recommend this story enough. Please go watch it. So anyways, you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.